Hey, this is Dominic, and this is your home for the cutting-edge conversations on optimizing your personal performance, lighting up your sex life, and living a purpose-driven life of your own design.
These are the topics that Dominic and I have both struggled with in our own lives and still don't always get right. This is Bryan. Welcome to the Man Amongst Men podcast.
Now, this is an episode you fellas have been asking Bryan and I to record for quite some time now. As guys, we've all been in this situation where we've gotten too excited, popped off too early, much to the dismay of ourselves and our partners. And if you have never experienced popping off too early, I think I speak on behalf of all men when I say, we hate you. And for the rest of us, this conversation is about bringing you 5 practical practices that can help you to command and consciously direct your sexual energy so you and your partner can play for as long or as short as you would like. I personally have been employing these 5 practices over the past 10 years, and I can tell you they've been an absolute game changer for me in terms of the confidence that I bring to my sexual interactions, the connection that I've been able to forge with my partner, and the experiences that we've had, the next level experiences sexually that transcend the superficial, these intimate moments that I'm able to create as a result of these 5 practices that I've employed in my life. Now, what this conversation is not about, it is not about leveraging some hack or technique that disconnects you from your partner, like a lot of the shitty advice that most men get early on in their lives about lasting longer, like don't go out with a loaded gun, like dull your senses with booze or smoke a joint before you have sex. I'm not opposed to either one of those things, but those 2 things can also disconnect you from having connected, meaningful sex. And it also diffuses your energy. Or also distracting yourself by thinking about baseball during sex. These are all ways of disconnecting from your partner. This is not what we're talking about today. We are also not talking about how to become a better ego-driven sexual performer. That's not what this is about. And this is also not about learning some sort of skill or technique that gives you a power that you wield or use against or hold above your partner's head. This is not about some sort of twisted power play. What this is a series of practices that allow you to consciously command and direct your sexual energy so you can have greater confidence, create better moments of connection, and have heightened levels of sexual experience. You can download this list of 5 practices at doinnerwork.com/5 practices. That's doinnerwork.com/5 practices, the number 5, and practices all one word. Let's get into it.
Dominic, you and I started 21 days ago a no masturbation, no porn challenge. And today you decided, hey, Bryan, I've got an idea. Let's do a topic called
how to last longer in bed.
Yeah, perfect. This is like going on a no cookie diet and then talking purely about baking.
Yeah. Let's just restate what you just said. We are on day 21 of no porn, no masturbation. This may have been the longest period of time that I've gone without masturbating since the 4-year period that I took off of masturbation and porn when I was in Sex Addicts Anonymous. So I feel like I have the fucking force of life of like a pride of lions inside of me right now. And I'm not sexually active right now either. So I haven't had a chance for that as an outlet either, my friend.
They say that sexual energy is our creative energy, which makes sense, right? We create things when we have sex. We create humans, we create energy. And I've heard that, I've felt that maybe a little bit. The other day I went for a run and I ended up writing a poem afterwards. It just flowed out of me. I was like, where is it? I don't write poems. I'm not a poet.
Well, you're a poet. You didn't even know it.
There it is. But so this no masturbation challenge, this cultivating the sexual energy thing, this is real.
This shit's real. Yeah. And I shared about this on a number of podcasts that the time of my life where I felt the most emboldened was during the time where I was not watching porn, where I was off masturbation for an extended period of time. And like that energy that would normally be diffused into a tissue somewhere, instead I had to put it somewhere. And it was towards building my own business and giving me the courage to leave behind a 15-year career in financial services to build a future that I wanted to live into. So this shit's real. This shit works.
Yeah.
We invite you to join us on the journey. All right. So here's another journey that we want to actually, you've asked us to take you on. I get emailed quite frequently when we put out a podcast around some of the topics you want to hear about. And one of the ones that you've been asking us for the past number of months is, how do I last longer in bed? I'm pretty sure every guy has had at least a few experiences where we've popped off before we've wanted to. The moment feels like it's been ruined. There's a little bit of guilt, a little bit of shame, maybe even a lot of shame around this kind of stuff.
Premature ejaculation is the longest 4-letter word.
That's one way of saying it, and it's quite accurate. Also, if you desire, presumably, to take care of your partner and to make sure that he or she is happy. And typically on these podcasts, we talk about it from a heterosexual male's perspective because that's our lived experience. And we invite everyone to listen, but we're probably going to speak from a heterosexual male and female perspective. It can be disappointing not to be there for your partner when you've popped off a little bit early. There's things that you can do, of course, but it's not quite the same as when you're both in the flow. So we wanted to dedicate a conversation to how you can implement some real practices that have made a big difference in both of our lives around how we've lasted longer in bed. And I know you want to put a disclaimer on this.
Yeah, absolute disclaimer. There will be no fact checking whatsoever into Dominic or Brian's background
in the show lives with our previous girlfriends.
Right. In the show notes, you will not see a list of our previous partners' contact information so that you can ask any questions
verify
whatsoever.
whether or not we're any good at this.
Right. These are practices that we're still practicing.
That's absolutely right. One of the things that I would want to mention, though, is these practices that we're going to. So first of all, Bryan and I are not experts in this space, right? We're just two guys who are on the journey. We've learned some stuff and we're sharing it with you. And we actually want to be bridge builders to people who have dedicated their life's practices. So we're going to be referencing authors, books, practitioners that you can go to for much deeper information. But this is something that we've distilled down to practical levels that we've implemented and made real differences in our lives. So that's contextually speaking for you, the important part. And also to give you a real specific example of how this stuff has worked in my life. When I was during that 4-year period of no masturbation, no porn, I also during that period went through an 11-month no sex also. So there's this 11-month window where I had no sex, no porn, no masturbation. And at the end of that 11-month period where I finally found someone that I wanted to be sexual with, you might imagine that as soon as penetration occurred that I just wanted to explode, which was the case. I was actually able to use these practices to be able to navigate that experience where we were able to have sex for an hour.
That is ninja level right there.
It was extreme.
11 months of no ejaculation. And then, you would think it would last 10 seconds.
10 seconds. And it almost did. Yeah. But using the stuff that I'm going to tell you about, I was able to, and also allowing her in on that process too. I let her know where I was.
You weren't doing it in secret.
It wasn't in secret. She was working with me, which was essential. And I'll tell you.
We'll get into that.
Yes. Please ask me the questions around that because it was something that I think everyone can learn from. Let's talk about the 3 reasons why this conversation about how to last longer in bed is important.
Where my head goes first, and I think where a lot of guys' heads go, when it's why do I want to last longer, we go to performance.
Right away, we go to performance.
I want to be known as the person that provides good service in bed, or
I'm fucking awesome,
I'm awesome.
I'm awesome. I'm a stallion. Yeah,
I'm awesome at sex. As a guy, that feels great. I think that's where we start.
Yep.
Kind of step 1 in this is related, but there is some level of confidence.
Yes. Step 1 is confidence.
Step 1 is confidence. It's so why do we want to feel this way? Well, we want to feel confident.
Yeah. We want to feel confident because I imagine that everyone here has had one of those situations where it's ended earlier than you've wanted it to. And that can lead to guilt. It can lead to shame. It could lead to getting in your head. It can lead to, am I going to disappoint someone? It could also lead to, we've heard men talk about their partner shaming them for that, being disappointed. And that compounds the problem. So yes, step number 1 is, this is really about how to build some confidence, but we want to do it. And we want to make very clear that this is not about you becoming some egocentric, performance obsessed idiot that doesn't take into consideration what's going on inside of your partner. So this is really about generating enough courage so that you can feel good, get out of your head, but then also lead to step number 2, which is really around connection.
Right. And this is a really important one. Dominic, you reached out to a group on Facebook called the Kaleidoscope.
We've referenced a number of times. It's an online sex positive forum run by our good friend, Alexa Martinez.
Yeah. Some women commented on this idea of lasting longer, and they almost put a stop sign up and said, well, hold on a second. I don't necessarily want to have sex for really long periods of time all the time.
Yep.
And so I think a direction that we could go in this, like let's last longer, is the egocentric, as you mentioned, confidence, but still disconnected. Right. Still all about us.
Yes.
I want to be really clear on like just lasting longer isn't the end game in this.
Right.
The connection that Dominic's kind of stage 2 here that Dominic's talking about, that is actually where we want to be. And sometimes it'd be great if we could last a long time in that. Sometimes let's get a quickie in. Right?
Sure.
That's okay.
Right. And if you're connected with your partner and not just about, am I looking good? Am I performing? Am I staying hard? Am I able to control my orgasm and then just go as long as I possibly want? Oftentimes that could be at the complete expense or ignoring of your partner. And as we heard from the women on this thread, and there was a lot of comments here, some of the women are like, yeah, I don't want to be pounded around for an hour. Like I get sore. It hurts. It's not what I like. And also sex doesn't have to be, most guys, when they think about sex, it's about penetration. And a lot of the women here, and even some of the men on here commented, the sex doesn't have to just be pure penetration. Like there was a comment on here about, I've had sex for an hour and only 15 of those minutes was penetration. We were doing a bunch of other things, touching, oral, other things that can wrap into that. And if you're able to connect with your partner, you can see what she's responding to. You could see that maybe you've been hitting it pretty hard for a little while and maybe you need to like remove yourself and move to oral and slow it down a little bit. That's stage 2. That's step number 2, is just really around connection.
Dominic, talk about your experience. So you went 11 months without sex. You implemented some of the techniques that we're going to talk about, but you brought your partner in on that.
Yeah.
Talk, how did that go down?
Yeah. I mean, she's a fitness instructor. She lived in a different coast. I took one of her classes and we just became friends. And then over time, things unfolded.
This has got all the elements of a great tryst.
Doesn't it? Right? Like,
So
I'm
far,
East
so
Coast.
good.
She's West Coast.
Yeah.
And so it unfolded nice and slowly. It's actually kind of how my arousal template works. Like I don't like to go right for it. I like there to be a little bit of a buildup because part of it is it fulfills my need for intimacy and seduction. Also, I really enjoy the seductive process. So she was game. I'm game. And I shared with her, like, I'm in this recovery. This was like 4 or 5 years ago, in Sex Addicts Anonymous recovery. I'm now on 11 months of no sex. And I think you're someone that like I would love to explore breaking that period of abstinence with. Of course, for her, that was like really, I don't want to say of course, but for her, that was like really exciting. And she felt honored and wanted to be a part of that. And I shared with her, I was like, listen, a big part of this is going to be me learning how to be intimate again and intimate in a new way. You know, after having gone through like 2 years of recovery, it's not just about surface level sex. It's about connecting with you. She came here and we ended up becoming intimate. And right upon like the initial penetration, it felt like all of that energy that had been stored up for 11 months was about to release. And what I had to say to her, I was like, listen, don't move. Do not make
Yeah, we know that technique, Dom.
Like,
don't move.
Don't move.
Yeah.
Don't make a sexy face. I'm like, don't make a noise. I'm like,
if you could not breathe, that'd be great.
just like millimeter by millimeter, like I needed to slowly enter her. And it was like this beautiful dance and space that she held for me. I had to go so slowly. I was on the edge the entire time. And each time that like I breathed and relaxed into it, I felt like I was closer to circulating some more of that energy around my body. It wasn't so concentrated in my crotch. And she was amazing in holding that space. And every once in a while, like she would get really excited and I would have to slow it down. But after it took a good, like, I'm not even joking, 15 minutes before I was even able to start thrusting with her. Like 15 minutes before I was able to start thrusting. It was really about just like going in and holding. And after 15 minutes, then I was able to, my energy was so circulated that we were able to have like amazing orgasmic sex with
I want to provide an alternative history, a different way this could have gone, right? If you didn't have this conversation up front with her,
Yep.
Can you imagine how awkward 15 minutes of no moving would be?
Yeah, been ridiculous. She wouldn't have known what was going
Right.
on.
What is going on? I'm confused and everything. And we'll talk about a couple other stories later, but you were cultivating connection,
And
right?
for
The
her,
stage 2 connection.
Yes, stage 2. And she loved it. Like she actually we talked about it afterwards. She loved seeing my awareness, my consciousness, like how committed I was to not allowing that urge to take over me. And when I dropped into that space where I was able to actually then really fully connect with her for the next like 35, 40 minutes, she had so many orgasms of different lengths and types that it was one of the most powerful experiences in her sexual history as well. So this was like a really beautiful experience of how we brought it together around like why you want to last longer in bed. It's not about some egocentric thing. It's about connection.
Lila, she runs a podcast. She's a friend of ours. It's Horizontal with Lila. Yeah. And one of the quotes that she had on the podcast we did with her is she said, there's nothing sexier than going slow and then slower than slow.
Slower than slow.
Yes.
And then slower than that.
Right. Right. You did that out of necessity.
Yeah.
And I wonder how we can pull that into our everyday sexiness, given that we're not all taking 11 months off.
Nor would I necessarily advise that for everybody. Stage number 3, this is like taking it to the next level. So step number 1 was really about building your confidence, right? This is why you want to last longer in bed. Step number 2 is about connection, which we just talked about. And then step number 3 is so that you can enter flow state when it comes to sex. So I know you got an analogy about this.
This is something that I would say is more recently discovered. For me, sex used to be about the penetration, about the physical, often in my head, not in my body. And so what we're talking about, like stage 1 with confidence, right? That is more of a head, a mental sort of state.
Yeah, you're right.
Connection, right? Now we're here with someone else and we're like riding the waves together.
Nice.
We can do that pretty immediately, right when we start having sex. Now, when we look at the topics of running, like running a race or running outside, there's that runner's high that people talk about.
Yeah, but that doesn't happen the first 5 minutes.
It doesn't happen. You don't hop on a treadmill and all of a sudden you're like, man, I feel so
I'm in the
good.
zone.
It's like, no, your joints are starting to get loose and you're starting to
Everything
move.
sucks in the first mile.
Everything sucks in the first mile, right? But then you get into this like high, into this flow state. And there are only a few ways in our human experience to get into flow state. Stephen Kotler talks a lot about this in Stealing Fire in his book, and the different access points to flow state. You may have had a feeling of flow state in running. What is flow state?
Pursuits. So if someone's never heard of flow state, like what would that be like?
Flow state is, I think there's an acronym for it.
Yeah. So it's like basically being in the zone, right? And the acronym that Stephen Kotler talks about in the book Stealing Fire, which we've recommended before, it's on our book list. And again, if you like our book lists, doinnerwork.com/books. It has a whole list of books you should read as a man and books you should read as a business leader. But the acronym that he gives that helps you to get a distinction for when you're in flow state is STIR. The acronym is STIR, S-T-E-R. STIR is selflessness. So like when you get out of your head, think about like when you're in sex and you're not in your head all the time, there's this like pure sensation feeling. That's selflessness. Timelessness, the T. So like you lose complete track of time. Like things that are 5 minutes can feel like an hour. Something that's an hour can go by in 5 minutes. So you just completely warped sense of time. The E in STIR is effortlessness. Yeah, like things may require some effort, but it doesn't feel like a burden or a grind. Like it's just like flowing. There's an ease to it. And the R is richness. And the richness basically means there's a depth to the experience. And I think this is probably one of the most important parts of the reason why we put this at stage 3, because the richness means it's not just some superficial surface level thing. If you're able to get beyond just confidence and beyond connection and get to this state of flow where there's a richness, there's a depth, there's an intimacy, there's a connection beyond a connection, that's like one of those experiences where you can feel love.
Oh, yeah. And it's actually hard to talk about this on a podcast because in parts it's unexplainable.
Yeah.
I like to scuba dive.
Yeah.
I can definitely get into a flow state while scuba diving. But when you're down there, you're just you're doing something different. You're in a different world. When you get back up to the boat, everybody wants to talk about, like, what was your experience? What did you see? What did you see? And you can explain the fish that you saw. It's very hard to explain the experience.
Yep.
So that stir that you mentioned, the selflessness, right? The timelessness, the richness, the ease.
Yep.
There's been moments both through sport, like running, and through sex, where afterwards I'm like, I have no clue how much time has just gone by, and I don't even want to think about it.
And it's a non-ordinary state. It's an optimal state. And most of us chase these flow state experiences. We don't necessarily know that that's what they're called, but there's a whole science around it. Stealing Fire is a great access point, entry point for you to listen to get your crash course on that. But sex, like you said before, and actually the categories that you can get there, sometimes through sport, through art, through meditation, sometimes through drugs. Now, if you look at something like video gaming can provide selflessness, timelessness, and effortlessness, but maybe not the richness, right? Like you can be losing that you can be missing out on that transcendent feeling. I know that television for me is selfless, timeless, effortless. That's why I like it, but it's not necessarily a rich experience.
Yeah, it's not something that's like life-giving that you feel fulfilled afterwards.
Right. Sometimes, depending on if it's like a documentary of some kind or a movie that's really inspired me, but most of the time it's kind of like just let me put my life on pause, my mind on pause. When it comes to sex and creating these intimate connections with others, that richness, if you can hit that stage 3, is really something magical, and that's why lasting longer in bed
exactly
matters.
and it's not, you can't get to that. It's impossible to get to that right away
in 3-minute quickie. Yeah, you know what I mean? Right?
And so it's kind of like you don't just go out and run a marathon, right? There's practices and techniques and ways to get there and to train, and that's what we're talking about today, so that we can get to that flow state. And by the way, this flow state that we're talking about, for me, and I've been practicing these practices, this does not happen every time.
Right. You don't hit flow state every single time that you have sex.
I would love
Don't
if
put
that
the
was the
pressure
case.
on yourself. And that's the thing, is we're not putting pressure on you to make it that. But it's like, it's something to kind of hold out there as an aspiration, a North Star.
And I even feel this in meditation. So there's been times in meditation that feel exactly like stir, like what you just talked about, where I don't have a clue how much time went by. I said, wow, that felt so good. It felt so amazing and freeing and connected. That doesn't happen every time I meditate either.
Correct.
Even if I meditate for that same period of time.
The important part is that you are practicing meditation.
Right.
And then every so often, like, you'll be rewarded with that next level experience.
That's right.
But it doesn't mean to judge yourself or to get down on yourself or to give up because, like, you're not feeling that every single time. So
exactly.
Great point. All right. So let's get into some of these practices. Every time I say practice, I think about Allen Iverson's press conference where he goes, not a game, not a game, not a game. We talking about practice, man. Practice.
I haven't seen it.
You haven't seen that? This is like a legendary thing where he's like shitting on practice.
Also, an Iverson quote officially ages us.
No, this goes beyond, man. This is like replayed
This is timeless?
all the time. This is timeless. It's kind of like Jim Mora's playoffs.
Right.
Like it's replayed through the rest of history. So anyway, here's not what we are talking about. Like there's a whole series of immature practices that you can do to last longer in bed. And guys will talk about this stuff. But if we're talking about the goal being connection and flow state, these are practices that actually disconnect you from your partner, that diffuse your energy. And I want to hit some of these. So the first one that we typically hear about is, don't go out with a loaded gun.
Oh, yeah. The classic. I think something about Mary really popularized the movie.
Yeah,
right?
Yeah, that's right. That ages you, my friend.
Yes,
okay?
that
ages you. So don't go out with a loaded gun. If you've never heard that term, it's basically like you basically drain your vein before you show up for a sexual experience. So you masturbate, you orgasm so that you're a little bit desensitized.
I mean, in college, I would do this just before going out to the bar.
Same.
Right?
I would do that.
Like just in case.
Yeah, I would do that too. And it was effective in the sense of like, it would desensitize me enough so that like when it came time for sex, okay, now we're not 20 anymore. That's one thing. But number two, so the resiliency time,
that
like
ages us.
That also ages us. And number two, you're not learning how to work with your energy. You're diffusing it. You're giving away one of your most potent life forces that if you were able to harness that channel that bring it into sex could be even more powerful. So that's number one. Get rid of this whole concept.
So your suggestion is go out with a loaded gun.
Go out with a loaded gun. But if you go out with a loaded gun, you need to learn these 5 practices we're going to talk about.
Right. Because I want to hit this one because it's important. If we took the advice, don't go out with a loaded gun, then we lose our energy, which Dominic just talked about. If we decide to go out with a loaded gun, but we don't know how to use it.
Correct.
Women will feel that. They will feel like they're being almost energetically penetrated.
Yeah.
If we don't know what to do with that energy, and it will feel sporadic. It will feel like a fire hose that is out of control.
Yeah.
And so what we do as guys often when we're unaware of this, we're like, well, don't go out with a loaded gun because then I can control myself. And the good news that I'm telling you is that you can control this with going out with a loaded gun, but you have to be conscious of it.
That's a great call because it can feel predatory.
Yes.
Right? Because you could be like aggressively going after someone because you just need an outlet so bad. And you're right. So it's important to bring together these 2 practices of like, if you're going to move away from going out with a loaded gun, then you do need to learn how to harness that energy in a powerful way.
Ilana met as one of our friends. She runs an event here called Wild Vessel. Yep. And she talks about this often as like each man has a sword. And we can either put that sword behind us, like in the sheath, and it can sit there and we can then use it as an expert.
Nice.
Or we can take it out and not really realize it's there and wield the thing around and it cutting people up all over the place.
Yeah.
And so in this, like, we want to have that power. We want to have that sword, but we have to be aware of what it is because it is powerful.
I like that. All right. Another immature practice that we saw this on the Kaleidoscope thread, altered states. So getting fucked up, right? Like drinking booze to desensitize you.
Yes.
Or smoking some Mary J before, like just to calm your nerves. Now, I'm not saying that those are bad things. I'm not judging you for those things. I certainly in the past, like drank a little bit so that I could take some of the edge off. But again, that is dulling you. It's distracting you. It's diffusing you. Those are not connective practices. Those are short-term solutions that don't lead to connection and flow state.
They're a short-term solution that I used for about 20 years. Right? Like, so like, yes, it does work, but not if we want to get to that connective state.
Yeah.
Because I could say none of those times were really connective.
Right.
Fun, no doubt.
Right.
But not connective.
Another one is the Austin Powers approach, which is really about distraction. So if you remember, I think it was in the first Austin Powers movie where he's being surrounded by the fembots and he's like enjoying they're just lavishing their love on him. And he needs to distract himself. He starts going like baseball, taxes, Margaret Thatcher naked on a cold day, Margaret Thatcher naked on a cold day. So that we've all used before. Again, like while you're in the act of sex, like you start to distract yourself and that can be useful. But again, that's disconnecting from what's in front of you, who's in front of you. And we want to start to build the practice of like, how can you be in it, but to circulate your energy differently so you can remain connected to your partner.
I used to stack that one with the alcohol just to make sure I could hang in there.
Immature practice stacking?
And prove that, yes.
It's like, I'm going to go out without a loaded gun. I'm going to drink and I'm going to think about Margaret Thatcher naked on a cold day.
Right.
Habit stacking. The last one, and this is one that I still use sometimes, like when I don't know what else to do is the pulling out. When you're in the act of sex and you're pulling it because you're right there at the edge and you don't know if you're going to go over the edge, you pull out. Sometimes like you have to do that, right? But again, the intention here is like, can you become so masterful in your energy and in your connection that you don't have to disconnect from your partner? Maybe you could stay connected by slowing down or maybe even just like stopping and like laying on her fully penetrated and then breathing into her belly without having to pull out. Like those are ways that you can stay connected. But again, it requires some of these other practices that we're going to talk about that will allow you to stay there.
I think a simple disclaimer here, especially if you're single and wear a condom, because we're talking about like maybe staying in here. So like wear a condom, 1, 2, better safe than sorry. So if you're practicing these things and you're with a partner and you're about to come, go ahead and pull out.
Yeah, right.
I don't want Man Amongst Men podcast to be responsible for
children
that are not discussed beforehand. Yeah, et cetera.
I feel like we really shouldn't have to make that disclaimer, but apparently we do. And before we transition to the practices themselves, I want to quote David Data from the book, The Way of the Superior Man, who we often reference. And it's one of the books that we have for download on doinnerwork.com/books. It's not a book for download, but it's a resource list. There's a section called, it's chapter 44, where he says, ejaculation should be converted or consciously chosen. And here's what he has to say. When a man has no control over his ejaculation, he cannot meet his woman sexually or emotionally. She knows that she can deplete him, weaken him, empty him of life force. She has won. When a man ejaculates easily, he creates ongoing distrust in his woman. At a subtle level, she feels he cannot be trusted. She and the world can deplete and depolarize him easily. This subtle distrust will pervade the relationship. She will not only doubt him, but actually act to undermine his actions in the world. And by undermining him, she demonstrates and tests his weakness. But she also hopes that through such tests, he can learn to remain full. Now that's a powerful statement here. And let's just unpack that a little bit before we get to the practices themselves. Because again, I think that's another reason why this conversation about being trustworthy. If a man is dragged around by the wild horses of his need to ejaculate, it's actually quite symbolic of, like, he could be dragged around by his other urges and impulses in life. He could be dragged around by his urges to eat. He could be dragged around by his urges to gamble. He could be dragged around by his urges to just be a workaholic or to disappear, to isolate. And there's like no more potent form for a woman to understand what you're made of than in that form of sexuality. And if like you are constantly popping off too early, then she sees that as a test, even on an unconscious level of, can I trust this man to go out in the world? And when he's defending our family or when he's defending his business, can someone else just undermine him so quickly where he completely collapses?
And all of this is so subtle. If you were going to go ask a woman, go ask your girlfriend if this is true, 99% of them would probably say absolutely not. That is not what I think of you. I think you should ejaculate. As a matter of fact, I like it when you ejaculate.
Yep.
That's cool. And also not anti-ejaculation, right? That what he said in the very beginning is the important part, either to withhold or consciously choose that this is what I'm going to do. And I've certainly had moments in my life through this practice where I have not wanted to, and I did, which feels 100% different than choosing to do it, choosing to ejaculate and ejaculating.
Yes. I
feel in those moments where I don't want to, or I want to contain it and I let it go, it feels weak. I feel weaker afterwards.
Yeah, because you didn't consciously choose. That's drifting. You know, we talk all the time about drift. If you haven't listened to our podcast about drift, go back. It's, I think, the second podcast we released called The Number One Enemy to Living a Powerful Life. The antidote to drifting is intentionality. And intentionality is making a conscious choice. Do I want to give my life force? Do I want to orgasm in this moment? Most of us have been trained to just orgasm always. We don't even think about it, right? So we'll go into that a little bit more as we get into these 5 practices. All 5 of these practices we're about to go through are going to be available for download at doinnerwork.com/5 practices. And it's the number 5 and practices. doinnerwork.com/5 practices. Okay. Number 1, the practice of edging. Okay. So this is basically practice like you play, or no, wait, practice like you're going to play, right?
Practice like you play.
Yeah.
This used to be something that my coaches would tell me in baseball and basketball. You practice like you play.
Yeah. So edging, this is when you're by yourself, you're masturbating. How are you training yourself during your self-stimulation times? Are you just basically racing to the orgasm as fast as humanly possible? Or can you bring yourself to that point of 80% there, 90% there, and then back off or play with like just staying in that space without going into what I've learned is called the vinegar strokes?
Yes.
You've heard of the vinegar strokes?
Of course.
The vinegar strokes are like you've hit that point of no return. Yes. Like there's no coming back from it. Getting up to that place, and then right before that, then just playing around in that space. Because when you're practicing that way, when you find yourself in the moment, then you can also do the same exact thing.
And we don't usually inspect what our habits are. And these habits, these masturbating habits, usually start at a very young age.
Oh, yeah.
Like we usually have I think is 8 to 12 is about the median range of when guys start masturbating.
Yep.
And so if you think about it, if we haven't updated our thinking since we're literally masturbating with an 8 to 12-year-old mentality.
Yeah. And when you were 8 to 12, or even like when you were a teenager, like when you were in the home, you want to get it done as fast as humanly possible because you don't want to get caught, right? So you train from an early age to get it done quickly and you don't even think about it.
So good news. You have full permission to enjoy your masturbation session without the fear of interruption.
Light a candle, put some music on.
Yes. And make it a moment.
Stretch the thing out a little bit.
That's right.
There's a guy, an awesome guy in the Kaleidoscope. His name is Ryan Thomas. And I know you've been on his podcast, which is called The Intimate Lifestyle.
The Intimate Lifestyle, yes.
Yeah. So Ryan weighed in on this beautifully. He said, so go check out his podcast, The Intimate Lifestyle. He said, lasting longer in bed has less to do with specific techniques in the bedroom and more so how you work with your sexual energy. How do you train your body? For example, if when you masturbate, you come within 2 minutes just to get it done with, you're training your body to come quickly. So masturbate for a minimum of 10 minutes. If you get bored, then use it as a meditation. Otherwise, you're training your body to associate sexual energy only with orgasm, and that's not going to help. This next thing you and I both found extra interesting, which was if you masturbate while watching porn, you train your body to come based on her sounds or based on visual stimulus. It takes you actually out of your body and you lose focus on the pleasure in your body so you don't know how to manage it. And it's because you're busy looking at things on the screen.
Yeah, it's the old adage of where we put our attention, it grows, right? So if our attention is visual and audio looking at the screen, our body at that point becomes a secondary player.
That's right.
In the whole situation, right? Which is different than when we want to connect with someone else.
That's right. As guys, like we don't oftentimes think about what is going on with my body right now. Like where am I feeling the pleasure? Like you're looking at the woman on the screen. You're like, is she moaning? What position is she in? Like how do her breasts look? How does her ass look? And you're not really thinking about what's going on inside of it. All of the energy has tended to just concentrate right in this area in your crotch. And when that happens, it's very easy to want to get a release there. So I think Ryan's points are really profound here. And he says, if you know your arousal arc on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being not at all aroused, not erect, 5 being erect and aroused, 8 being extremely close to coming, 9 is the point of no return, and you're just about to start coming, then bring yourself to a 7 or an 8 regularly. Then slow down. And then start to connect with what's going on inside of you. What parts of your body feel really good?
Now,
what parts of your dick feel good?
I know a lot of us masturbate for a release, right? It's before we go to bed, we want to relax, and I understand that. See if there are some times that you can take aside where it's not just that, and just ask, what have I learned in this moment? Have I learned to feel more of when I'm at a 6, a 7, an 8? What does a 9 feel like?
Yep.
Because the more we're able to practice like we play, understand our bodies in the moment by ourselves, we're going to have a lot of confidence, right? Stage 1, when we come into contact with a woman or a partner.
Absolutely. Yeah. So that's step number 1, which is really about edging. Okay. Step number 2, practice number 2 is breath work. This was a game changer for me, right? When I read David Data's The Way of the Superior Man, breath work and breathing techniques and breathing during sex really, really matters. So we just talked about how all of the energy tends to concentrate down in your dick area, like when you're having sex, right? And I know that for most of my sexual history up until I started learning some of this stuff, I didn't even think differently, right? I didn't even think twice. It was my dick is just throbbing. All of the energy is there. But when you breathe, you can circulate that energy. It's no longer concentrated in that one area. You can bring it into your belly. You can bring it into your arms. You can bring it into your legs. I know this may sound weird if you've never practiced this before, but when we get really aroused, oftentimes we stop breathing. All that energy concentrates on that that one point in that area.
You said little.
I know.
Oh man, yeah. I can't let that slide.
The little tiny minuscule area. You guys know what I'm talking about, right? In that spot, and think about squeezing a balloon. If you squeeze a balloon that has water in it, then it wants to burst. But if like you can just let go of that and allow the rest of it to hit your body, then you'll be able to stay with it a lot longer.
You'll be able to stay with it longer. And also, it also feels good in the rest of your body.
Yeah.
And these are just the things that we aren't taught. But when we start to circulate that, the way I do it typically, Dom, like the image that I have in my head is, and this is what I learned in the Multi-Orgasmic Man, right?
Yep.
Another book, is when that energy feels really concentrated in that really large space, not the small space. I breathe and I think about my spine being like a straw.
Yep.
And when I breathe in, I take that energy and I bring it up my spine. And then from there, it dissipates into the rest of my body.
Yep.
Which again, if you haven't done breath work, if you haven't done this, it sounds kind of crazy.
Yep.
But it works.
It works. So let's maybe, if like you've never done that and breathing up your spine sounds a little too strange for you, to make it really simple and approachable would be take a 5-count breath in and a 5-count breath out. Now, like I'm talking about when you're with your partner. And when you're having sex, you can actually start to breathe in more slowly. And you're also going to want to slow down some of your movements too. But it would just be like a through the nose. And then the breath out is just as important because what that does is it's activating your parasympathetic nervous system, which is the reduction of stress, the calming down. That is going to help you to not only circulate the energy, but it will center you. And you can do it without necessarily like disrupting your sexual energy or disrupting her sexually. But again, like I use this, like I told you with my partner after breaking abstinence for 11 months, I let her know what was going on.
Yes. This is hugely important. And
you have a story where you didn't let your partner know.
I will absolutely tell that story. But also when you start this practice, whether it's on your own or even if you did it for a while on your own, when you do this with a partner, it will not feel natural. And one of the important reasons it is important to have a conversation with your partner, but it won't feel natural. But as you continue to do it, it will feel more natural. So you can get out of your head while you're doing it. So in the interim, while you're practicing this, don't do what I did. I read the Multi-Orgasmic Man. I was like, this is great. I'm going to try this new technique so that I don't pop off. I'm not going to do the alcohol and what was the other one? The Margaret Thatcher wintertime baseball, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to stack my unconscious practices, right? I'm going to do this right. But what I didn't do right was tell my partner. So the first time I'm trying this, I'm with a fairly new partner. Didn't tell her what was going on. And I just mid having sex, I just start breathing heavily like Dominic just did in the microphone.
Yeah.
And so I remember her giving me kind of a quizzical look, which then made me tense up and my dick went soft.
Yeah, because you disconnected from her.
Totally disconnected with her. Went straight to my head, went into fear mode. And then all of a sudden, like once my dick's off, I'm like, oh my God, like I'm found out. She knew I was doing a technique.
Yeah.
And she just looked at me and goes, what are you doing? Yeah. Like, what just happened? I got angry and whatever else. But I tell that story just because it can be awkward if as we start to try these things out with a partner. So my suggestion is, Dominic's suggestion is bring them into the process. Don't try to do this on your own.
How are you able to make it work more effectively the next time?
Exactly what we just said, because she made fun of me. So she said, eventually, once we put our pants back on, she said, what was that? That was terrible. I was like, well, I've been trying this new technique. She's like, why didn't you just tell me?
Right. She wanted to be brought in with it.
She wanted to be brought in with it. And I said, okay, well, next time, this is what I would like to try. She goes, great. I'm happy to work on that with you.
And again, like the breathwork practice can take place without a partner, like actually during masturbation, like practice like you play. You can start to breathe as you're getting to the 8 to the 9, closing in on orgasm and like edge. So you combine the edging with the breathwork.
Yes. But I will say that it is the difference between going to the batting cages and having a live pitcher throw curveballs at you, right?
That's very true.
It's a different ballgame when another human's involved.
That's right. Yeah, it's going to the next level. Those first two, so edging and breath work, were by far the most effective for me as I approached this work. Those made the biggest difference in both your life and my life in terms of being able to last longer. So these next few are kind of like, okay, once you take it to the next level, what are these other practices? So practice number 3, we also learned about in the Multi-Orgasmic Man, which is really around dick kegels. I don't think they call it dick kegels.
That's definitely a Dominic term.
Is it?
That's not a scientific term. No.
It's my term?
That's
okay,
your term,
cool. So
yeah.
we'll call it dick kegels, and I can.
You can coin that.
Nice.
Yeah. It's physiologically not accurate.
Physiologically, it's.
But that's fine.
Biologically,
yeah.
No.
Conceptually sounds great. I like it.
So Kegels, if you're not familiar with those, it's when women strengthen the muscles in their, I don't even know the exact, what do you call it? Like in the
it's their
vaginal region, what, cervix?
It's their pelvic floor.
Pelvic floor.
Right. But we all have, there's a muscle called the PC muscle,
Yep.
which stands for, I think it's a very long term, but they call it the PC muscle. And we all have, like men and women both have this PC muscle. And if you don't know what that is in your body, just clench your asshole right now. Right. Often you're doing a Kegel when you get scared and you tense up and you feel that muscle go. It's the same muscle we use literally like when we're pooping and some other things. So a practice that I incorporated about a couple of years ago now, I used to have, I don't know if you know this, Dominic, I used to have this fear of peeing in public.
Oh,
not like on the street, but in a bathroom, right? Like in a public bathroom.
Yeah. Where there's like a urinal and there's no divider and someone else walks up next to you.
Yeah, exactly. And I remember the time it really killed me the most is I was at a Cubs game in Chicago.
Yeah.
And they have these troughs.
Wrigley Field, oldest stadium in the business.
Old school, right? So everybody just pissing into this trough. And you're also it's like in the middle of the room. So now you're sitting eye to eye across from someone as well.
Stage
and these
fright.
things are packed in between innings. And so stage fright, right? Exactly. So I knew that I had this thing that was unresolved. I felt very unmanly because it's like, what, you can't piss in the trough. Like, what's wrong with you? Now I'd been drinking beer. So usually I was a little bit numb and that would have been fine. So I wouldn't have had a problem pissing in a situation like that. But I also had to piss extremely bad. I had to really go to the bathroom. So I go in there, I pull it out. I'm looking at this guy's eyes across the way from me and I cannot piss. But I have to. My bladder is full. Like physiologically, gotta go.
Were you like locked eyes with it? Like how long did you look at him in the eyes?
I mean, no, like, you try to look everywhere else, but then like, there's a dick on my right, a dick on the left, a guy's eyes in front of me. Like the ceiling was the only safe place, and that just looks weird. I couldn't win. And so I remember just this feeling of shame, putting my dick back in my pants, not pissing, zipping back up and just like walking out of the bathroom sadly.
You didn't even go to like a stall or something like that?
No. There was, I can't remember.
Walked out of the bathroom sad?
I was just sad with the full bladder. And I was like, what is wrong? This is ridiculous. Like my stage fright is overwhelming my physical ability to piss. This is insane. So I tell vets because this exercise that I'm about to talk about that I learned in the Multi-Orgasmic Man has not only helped me in my sex life, but my fear of pissing in public has gone away completely.
Really?
Yes. And so what I do is that Kegel muscle, that PC muscle that we just talked about, every single time that I piss, I cut off my piss. Like they say, you can't stop once you start. Untrue. Mm-hmm. You can stop once you start. I do it usually 2 to 4 times every single time I piss. And it's almost like when people they pray before they eat. It's a reminder to be thankful in doing something that we do every single day, like eating. Well, we pee every single day. And so my practice is just doing these Kegel exercises, cutting off my pee 2 to 4 times every single time I pee. And that has helped tremendously with 2 things. One, the control that I have in bed over ejaculation, because it's the same muscle that we use to control that.
Right. So when like the orgasm wants to rise, you can clench down and you can bring it back down and then you can breathe it and then circulate it.
That's exactly it.
That's right.
That's exactly it. And with pissing, I have a lot more control as well. And it's become kind of a fun little game where people look at me strange in the bathroom. Like if I have to go in those stalls, like there's an office that I work in where there's only one urinal and then one stall right next to it. And so if somebody's in the urinal, I'll go to the stall.
And you can hear it.
And you can hear it just going, just cutting off.
I can vouch for that. When Bryan pisses here at the apartment, you hear him in the bathroom. He does this every single time he takes a piss. It's very true.
And it is still a fun game. And the last thing I'll say about the exercise is that we actually combined this Kegels with breath work. And so what I do every single time is when I pee, I clench that muscle and I also breathe up. Like I kind of bring that same energy up through my spine.
Very cool. My experience with Kegels is really interesting. So when I took all that time off of masturbation, and I wasn't having sex as much either, when I started coming back into masturbation or having sex, I found that like I used to shoot really far. Let's just put it that way. When I took 4 years off of it,
what is really far?
Like if I was between her legs, like sometimes it would go over her head.
That's some good range.
Yeah, it would go far, right?
Yeah.
And sometimes it would like hit faces like from between the legs, like and that used to be a problem for that reason. But then it turned into like maybe splashing above the belly button, and that's it. Maybe reaching the bottom, whatever. And I'm not saying that's a problem. I was just like, oh wow, like the muscles just weren't put to use anymore. And so what I've done is over the past like 6 or so months, I do 300 contractions a day. So like I'll do 100 contractions of the PC muscle in the morning before I get out of bed. I'll do it 100 before I turn out the lights or right after I turn out the lights. And then I'll do it like another 100 sometime during the day. Maybe while we were doing this podcast, you'll never know.
Is it happening right now?
No, it's not happening right now, but you would never know if it was. And after doing that for 6 months.
Do your eyes move? Like, do they?
Yeah, something moves.
Do they kind of open a little high, a little more than normal?
How about this? Next time, see if you can discover when I'm doing. I've never done it in front of you. So, but that has brought back the potency and like the shots now are back to where they used to be.
Really?
Yes.
Oh, this is a superpower. I didn't know I was going to get out of this podcast.
Yeah.
I can't say that the Kegels that I do have necessarily increased distance, but I'm not doing that many reps either.
Yeah, I'm doing 300 reps a day, and it's like it doesn't take long. Like so, 100 reps in the morning takes like 2 minutes.
Do you combine breath work with that?
No.
It's just Kegel.
I found it kind of hard to do breath work with it because like I'm contracting.
Yeah.
I try to breathe into it, but sometimes it's difficult because I don't know quite why.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, chewing gum and walking is difficult too. So
we're men. We do one thing at a time effectively. All right. So Dick Kegels, number 3. And by the way, like I said, you can download this information with the book links and everything, the 5 practices at doinnerwork.com/5 practices. The fourth practice is not ejaculating during sex. And this is one of those things that, again, most men will drift through life never really even thinking about because we trained ourselves at an early age that every time you touch your dick or you have sex, that it automatically assumes an orgasm. And going back to David Data's thing is that orgasm should be consciously chosen. Otherwise, you're just drifting. And some of the problems with racing towards orgasm or thinking that that's got to be the outcome is number one, you're always outcome oriented. It's like, I have to have that orgasm. Number 2 is you miss some of like the magic of slowing things down because you're so focused on either orgasm for yourself.
yeah, and think about pace, right? It's like, okay, slow, faster,
Okay, gone.
Right? Like, and that is typically the trajectory that we're used to. But if the idea is, hey, I am choosing to not ejaculate this time, what does that pace look like?
Yes. Because you can end up in really predictable sex patterns the other way. Like you were saying, slow, fast. Same position. I finish in that position. But if you want to get to that third stage that we were talking about, right? Stage 1 is courage. Stage 2 is connection. Stage 3 is flow state. Flow state involves being at different speeds, being in different positions, doing different things. Maybe it's not always about penetration. And if you can detach from this need to always end up orgasming and to actually enjoy the journey, you turn the journey into being the most exciting part. You'll open up entire worlds of pleasure for yourself and for your partner that you didn't even know existed.
Yeah, we talked about on the earlier one here, when you're masturbating, see what you can learn.
Yep.
And then with a partner, it's a million times better. Right? So now we've created some space to explore, to play, as opposed to just on that same trajectory that we're used to.
Yeah.
The focus now, if we're playing in this non-ejaculation stage, is we can start to expand our zones of pleasure.
Yeah. Talk more about that, man.
So we're always focused on our dick, right? while we're having sex, and
because it feels amazing.
And the out, and it feels
amazing. Because it feels amazing. Yeah.
But if we can then start to focus on other parts of our body. So like we usually feel towards the tip, the head of our dick is where the most pressure is at and where we feel the orgasm first. And if you start from that point and then move your awareness like down the shaft into your legs, like what does the rest of your body start to feel like? What is that touch sensation of her arm on your back feel like?
Right. Like
and you can actually
feel that.
You can actually feel that.
Yeah.
Right. Usually when we're so focused on the tip of our dick, we can't even feel the rest of it because it's so intense.
Like I love when my partner runs her hand through my hair and like maybe starts to scratch the back of my head a little bit. Like that is extremely gratifying for me. But when I'm open to feeling that, if I'm so concentrated down into this big area between the legs,
giant area, yes.
This colossal area between the legs, then I can miss all of those other micro sensations that can really add to it. It's almost like if you think about making a meal, like you're missing the seasonings, right? Like you're just eating the fucking chicken, but you're missing all of like the things that can give it the flavor.
That makes it great. That makes it memorable.
Yeah.
And what we're talking about right now, Dom, is just one of our 5 senses. Right?
Yeah,
which is
so
just
incorporate
touch.
all the other senses, right?
So now we start to like, what are we bringing into our visual? What are we bringing into our scent? What are we hearing? What are we even tasting? Like we can start to use all 5 of our senses as opposed to just that little part on our dick.
Very true. Yeah. I mean, being able to smell her skin and noticing, are there different parts of her body that smell differently? And do they provide a different kind of arousal for you? Like that is amazing. Bryan's, I told Bryan a very personal story about a partner that I have who has like, she smells amazing and different parts of her body. And I told him of a part of her body that she smells really amazing. And I'm not going to get that personal here, but he just mimicked that. So this is probably not interesting for you. Anyway, it was funny for me. It's definitely hilarious for Bryan. But like the smells and how like your partner tastes it, like once you start to incorporate that under the blanket of what you just said, Bryan, expanding your zones of pleasure, it opens up new worlds. And then it also helps you to break free from the patterns, the rituals, the routines that keep sex boring, that keep you out of flow state.
Yes.
Here's something that you're going to need to know, fellas, as you're listening to this. Chances are your partner, if she's a woman, has only ever known men who are racing towards orgasm, right? They always want to come. We always want to come, chances are. And so when you start to play in this, where like you actually may go through a full sexual experience and then you finish without orgasming, it's going to scramble her brain a little bit. And chances are she may ask you, what's wrong? Don't you want to come? And she's going to want to push you towards that many, many times. This has been our experiences. Other men who have practiced this have also experienced this. And so you, again, want to bring her in on what's going on, why you're doing this, right? Like I'm learning to circulate my energy. I'm actually also doing this maybe for you, like so that I can attune my attention to you. Do not use this as a fucking power play over her. That brings it back to ego. That takes you out of connection. That takes you out of flow state. This should really be about bringing her into that process. Now, even if you bring her into this process, there's most likely going to be a part of her that still wants to make you come because it's validating for her. And I know that when I first started practicing this about six and a half years ago with my intimate partner who I was with for 2 years, as soon as she found out I was doing that, she raised her game to this level of like, she pulled out every stop imaginable that she knew, like every button that she could push in me to try and push me over that edge.
And think about this, right? We would do the exact same thing,
right?
Like we love a challenge. I'll speak for myself. Like it's a challenge and I love it when my partner orgasms. It's sexy. It's arousing. I feel like in some ways even accomplished, right? Even if I don't own it, right?
Yeah.
But I'm part of it. Okay, cool. So yes, our partners will want that and push us to that edge quite literally. And so it takes an extra special power to resist that.
Yeah, because if she can push you to that edge, and as a masculine male practitioner, if she can push you over that edge, she recognizes then that she has the power to collapse you. And that goes back to David Deda's quote here in the book here, which is, she's just tested you. And then she's beaten you. She's won. So on this, and again, I don't want to bring this back to winning and losing. And this is not about having a power play over her, but on a subconscious level, I've found that when I've brought my partner into this, and I've let her know that I'm not orgasming. And then she's tried to push me over the edge. And like, I've maintained my boundary. I've maintained my structure on a subconscious level. She fucking loves me more because of it, because she can trust that. There's a part of that she says, wow, this guy can really lock in when needed and a lesser man would fall. This guy can hold firm. There's something about that, even if she can't name it, that she feels drawn to and trusts more.
Yeah.
Okay.
And just from a practical standpoint, if you haven't done this before, the idea of pulling out hard and not coming is going to feel strange. It's almost like now what? Like, what do I do now?
What do I do with this thing?
What do I do with this thing, right?
Or you have to breathe, because like you can end up with blue balls for sure.
Yes.
But like you have to breathe that through and circulate.
Yeah. So I think the kind of going back to the breathing is important. Walk it off. Do some careful push-ups, like something to kind of move still, because you're going to have, when we orgasm, we have that feeling of release and the energy is gone. All of that energy that is gone will still be inside you, and you will feel an immense amount of power. Now, when we don't release it, that feels really good after a little while, but in that moment with a hard cock, it can feel strange.
That's right. Yeah. But it does feel powerful, like you were saying.
Powerful, big time.
Yeah. All right, last one. And this is another next level practice that's probably not intuitive, but the practice of eye gazing before sex. So if you're not familiar with eye gazing, we're going to link an article to the New York Times that says, if you want to fall in love with anyone, try this practice. Eye gazing is the practice of just sitting down across from your partner, very close with one another. You can touch each other, but most likely, like for the first few times, just try like sitting across from each other without touching. And you gaze into their left eye. They gaze into your left eye. The left eye is important because that's considered to be the receptive eye. You can be seen. You can see the other person.
I'm doing it with you right now.
I can feel it.
Yes.
Yeah. And the intent is to eye gaze for about 3 to 5 minutes without words. Now, what's going to happen is, if you've never practiced this before, a whole bunch of feelings and emotions are going to kick up to the surface. You're going to feel maybe awkward. Maybe you're going to want to feel the need to smile or to laugh or to diffuse the situation or to look away, because emotions are going to be coming up to you. Now, this is again the opportunity where you want to use your breathwork practice to ground you, right? So if you're sitting, just to like root your butt into your seat a little bit more, your feet firmly planted in the ground, like feel grounded. And what ends up happening is, when the chaos of that emotions, the dust starts to settle, then you can lock in with the other person, and like you're already at step number 2, which is really you're in connection at that point. You're confident because all of the weird wonky shit that you had to navigate through, like the dust storm, it has settled. So you've already moved through courage, right? Like confidence. And you're in that place of connection. And if you can also synchronize your breathing with your partner, like look at her breath and see if you can breathe along with her, and maybe even guide her on the breath to take longer inhales in, longer exhales out. Now you're deeply connected with one another, and that can lead to longer sex versus sometimes feeling so frazzled, frenetic, I need to get it in, and then you pop off, you race too quickly to the finish line.
Dude, this is such a beautiful practice. I'm really glad you brought this one in, because it's a really great bridge between doing it all on our own and masturbating, and then going straight to penetrative sex.
Yeah.
This is such a great bridge because of everything that you just said. And it takes a special man to provide that structure.
Yeah.
To provide the leadership to sit down, explain what this is, why we're going to do it. And women love that. They like to be like in that container so that they can flow and feel. And so it's a very confident, connected sort of activity.
So you talked about the structure that if your partner is feminine, the structure is like that masculine container around it to actually set it up so that like she understands why you're doing what you're doing. Part of it, I mean, sometimes it could be like you don't have to explain all of it to her. It could be a little bit of a mystery if you understand if you know how to navigate that with your partner. But part of it could just be, I'd love to engage in a practice with you for a few minutes. It's going to be 3 to 5 minutes maximum. It's for us to be connected. I'm going to guide you through it. There's no talking. It may feel a little bit uncomfortable, but it's ultimately to bring us to a place of dropping in with one another. How does that sound? Like making an invitation? Allow her to ask any questions or something like that. Cool. that could be one way of bringing her in on it so that she knows what's going on. And in the New York Times article, what they say is after about, I think it's 3 minutes of gazing into someone's eyes, what's released in the brain is a chemical called oxytocin. And oxytocin is a bonding agent. It's like the intimacy and love agent, which basically means like you're connecting chemically with another person on a really potent, powerful force, which does lead to that stage 2 of connection, which could lead to that stage 3 of flow state. So that's a quick way to drop right in a 3 to 5 minute period of connecting with your partner. Cool.
Love it.
All right, man, let's quickly hit these 5, summarize one more time, which is number 1, the practice of edging. Number 2, breathwork practices. Number 3, Dom's term around the dick kegels. Number 4, no ejaculating during sex. And number 5, eye gazing. And all of these will be linked in the download that we've created for you at doinnerwork.com/5 practices. And again, the reason why you want to last longer in bed is really about number 1, building your confidence. Number 2, about building connection with your partner. And then 3, ending up in these sexual flow states far more often than not.
You know what? It's just a lot more fun.
Hell yeah, it's a lot more fun, man. Enjoy. Hey, did you get something of value out of this podcast? If so, I'm going to ask you a favor. Would you be so amazing as to go over to Apple Podcasts and leave us a rating and a review? Your ratings and reviews can show someone who's just discovered our podcast for the first time that we are worth listening to. And that way we can reach a wider audience. So please head over to Apple Podcasts, leave us a rating and review. You rock.